alone, with the Eagles, in whatever combination. What 3 or 4 would you toss in there?
I'd probably put Take It Easy in, because it was the first Eagles song and really sort of was America's and everybody's first image of our band, you know, and I think it was the vistas of the Southwest, and, you know, it was the beginnings of what became country rock. I would put in Desperado, which is the first song Don Henley and I wrote together, and I think I was 24 and Don was 26, and to think that 20 years later, you know, this song would stand the test of time, would still be being recorded by people and performed by people, I would put that in there. One of These Nights, my personal favorite Eagles song, along with I Can't Tell You Why. I think I would put, you know, those are 2 of my personal favorites. From my own career, The One You Love, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and True Love, one of my favorites, my take on Al Green. But, you know, there's a lot of songs in my past, and, you know, songs are like your kids, you know, you raise them from, you know, the time they're little till they're big and grown up, and then you wave goodbye as they go out the door. And, you know, I have many favorites.
Now, missing from that list is Hotel
California, yeah.
Which a lot of people would say, just from the standpoint of sales and identity of the Eagles, that seems like it belongs on the list.
Yeah, I think you could put that in. That was probably our best record. As far as making a record is concerned, I think Hotel California, the album, and Hotel California, the song, were probably the zenith of the Eagles in that what we had to say came together with our learning of how to make records. And that song was co-written with Don Henley and also with Don Felder, an often not recognized but integral part of the Eagles in the second half of the band.
It's also a very sophisticated lyric. And a lot of songs have verse, chorus, maybe a second verse. Now let's repeat the whole thing, get the chorus and the hook in there, and we're done. I mean, this thing is a real narrative.
Well, Don and I talked about that song, and you know, we were and are big Steely Dan fans. And we were always quite amazed that Steely Dan was so brave lyrically. They got the Steely Dan T-shirts. You know, they had lines in their songs that we would sort of looked at ourselves and says, whoa, would we have put that in one of our songs? We started talking about Hotel California and wanted to sort of write a song that was sort of like an episode of The Twilight Zone. All of our songs were cinematic, but we wanted to open up with it was just one shot to the next, and they didn't necessarily make sense. It was just picture of the guy on the highway, picture of the hotel, picture, you know, and the guy walks in, the door opens, strange people, and it's just sort of following this guy, and it doesn't really make sense. It's just sort of like I said, an episode out of The Twilight Zone or something. And so we decided to just sort of create something strange, just to see if we could do it.
Mirrors on the ceiling, the pink champagne on ice, and she said, we are all just prisoners here of our own device. And in the master's chambers, they gathered for the feast. They stab it with their stealing knives, but they just can't kill the beast.
And then, of course, a lot was made out of it, a lot was read into it, a lot more than probably there exists, but, you know, I think we achieved perfect ambiguity.
What was the line, they stab it with their stealing eyes, they just can't kill the beast? Was that a tip of the cap to Steely Dan?
As they had said in a song of theirs called Tell Me Everything You Did, they had a line where the guy was arguing with his girlfriend, and the line was, turn up the Eagles, the neighbors are listening. Walter Becker had a girlfriend at the time who was a big fan of the Eagles, and I think it used to grate on Walter that she used to play Eagles records at the house maybe, but that's how, so they sent a little message to us, and yeah, we gave them a little tip of the tam.
If you achieved perfect ambiguity, what's the strangest interpretation of a line in that song that you've heard from anybody?
Well, I don't think it's not so much one line, but just that they just took that overall album and opened it up and took that picture of us with, you know, and I was watching on, you know, some religious channel, you know, the guy holding up the album saying, and this woman is a priest in the devil's church, and this over here, right here is, you know, that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, really? I didn't know that when we hired them.
With Hotel California, was it almost inevitable that at that point a certain kind of peak was reached? Maybe it wasn't your best album, but commercially it was the most successful album. And at that point, it almost had to start tapering off because you'd positioned yourselves sort of as musicians slash outlaws. Well, how much of an outlaw can you be if you're this universally successful, and not only is the kid who wants to drop out of school listening, but his teacher's listening?
There are only a few people in rock and roll who understand the experience of going in to make an album after you've sold over 10 million copies of the album you previously made. I guess starting out, you know, one dream would be to have a multi-platinum album. We never, of course, anticipated that we would go over 10 or 15 million. But it turns around and puts a tremendous amount of pressure on you to, you know, to live up to everything that was said and about that record and, you know, the amount of sales. Somebody asked my friend Bob Seger why the Eagles break up. And he said, well, in 2 words, Hotel California. You know, and I think in some ways we did peak, you know, that was, you know, the best work that we did. That was where everything really came together, personnel, songwriting, the experience in the studio to learn how to make records and put them together. It was really an exciting time. It was an easy record to make. The whole album was done in 6 or 7 months. It was not a difficult record to make. We were on a roll. It's good to have hit records because even though you may feel that you haven't done your best work, you know you're on the right track. You know, and I think we were bristling with confidence at that time, and we weren't afraid to step out and take some chances, and we had a very, very prolific couple of guitar players in our band, too, guys that were really good. You
think it was your best creatively, critically, as well as commercially?
I think, yeah, I think there's no doubt. Side one's pretty impressive, and then if you include The Last Resort and a couple of the other tunes on side two, it's a pretty good record.
How did you react to the occasional criticism? And anybody who's this successful and then ultimately mainstream is going to get it, which is, all right, these guys, good tunesmiths, they knew what they were doing, but it got a little bit too slick and a little bit too accessible to everybody, and therefore, by definition, it loses its edge.
Well, those are critics who lose their leverage when all of a sudden something gets mass acceptance. Then they're no longer arbiters of taste, and obviously anything that 15 million people like can't be all that good. But, you know, we just took that with a grain of salt. You know, we used to look at the, you know, I mean, I wish I could pull out, like, the reviews from Rolling Stone of Hotel California. I don't think they were glowing. And, you know, Henley and I just sort of looked at it and said, we must be selling a lot of records. Even they don't like us.
You mentioned it. We've got it. It's from February of 1977. It's the Rolling Stone review of Hotel California. This is the very definition of a mixed review. Hotel California, this is by Charlie Walters, showcases both the best and worst tendencies of Los Angeles-situated rock, but more strikingly, its lyrics present a convincing and unflattering portrait of the milieu itself. Don Henley, handling 5 of the 8 vocal tracks, expresses well the weary disgust of a victim or observer of the region's luxurious excess. And then it goes on to praise the musicianship and how catchy some of the songs are. But it seems to me almost predictable in that from a New York perspective, the easy label to attach to almost everything that was coming out of the West Coast was, this isn't about anything that's really relevant. This is about people self-absorbed and kind of just hanging around.
Well, we showed him, Bob. We shut that guy right up, and a bunch of others like him. Now, I really believe, you know, firmly that if you're getting bad reviews, you're doing something right.
But don't they hurt?
Well, we used to have a list, you know, which was sort of punch them on sight. There was a punch them on sight list, you know, and we were protective not only of our own music, but I think what really hurt was when we'd see people rail Jackson Browne or J.D. Souther or Souther Hillman and Frey, or, you know, people that we knew, you know, not just ourselves. But I think you have to, you know, you have to understand, you know, that these people sit at typewriters and, you know, in little funky corners of the world and sort of wish they were doing what we were doing. We didn't get a lot of good reviews. Got a lot of good reviews live. You know, our show was, you know, we used to get good reviews toward the end. But, you know, we were never the darlings of the critics. And that suits me just fine.
Where'd the name Eagles come from?
Well, the Eagles, the reason we chose that name, I think, was because it represented a lot of things. There was the southwestern Native American approach, which was that the eagle embodied the highest aspirations of man. It was the creature that flew closest to the sun, was the only bird